I always thought my family was normal. Not perfect, but normal. We had dinners together, went on vacations, celebrated birthdays. My parents weren't the affectionate, tell you the love you type, but they weren't cruel either. At least, that's what I told myself for most of my life. I have an older brother, Jason, for years older than me. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said we were treated fairly. Not exactly the same, but close enough. But now? Now I know I was lying to myself. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Small things that felt off, but not big enough to call out. Like how, whenever Jason and I fought, I was always the one who had to apologize first. Even if he started it. Even if we were both wrong. If I argued, I was being dramatic or too sensitive. If Jason got in trouble at school, my parents defended him. The teachers were being unfair. He was just stressed. When I got in trouble, I was lectured, told I needed to make better choices. If Jason forgot something, homework, practice gear, even his goddamn wallet, my parents dropped everything to fix it. If I forgot something, Mia, you need to be responsible for yourself. I told myself it didn't matter, that some families just had favorites, and that didn't mean they didn't love me. But then Jason got sick. At first, it was just exhaustion, some weight loss. Then it got worse, fast. The doctors diagnosed him with kidney disease. My parents were devastated. I was too. I didn't want him to die. They tried everything, medications, treatments, special diets. Nothing worked. Then the doctor said the word that changed everything. Transplant. And suddenly, all eyes were on me. I remember sitting in that cold hospital room, the antiseptic smell burning my nose, when the doctor brought up the possibility of a living donor. My mom turned to me instantly, smiling. Wouldn't it be amazing if you were a match? Like it was already decided. Like this was one of those heartwarming stories where the selfless sibling saves the day. My dad nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jason didn't even look up from his phone. I felt strange, off balance, like the ground had just shifted beneath me. I wasn't against helping him. I didn't want him to suffer. But something about how easily they assumed, how they didn't even ask me, made my stomach twist. I went along with the testing, hoping I wouldn't be a match. But of course, I was. And the moment the results came in, it was decided. My mom cried tears of joy. My dad clapped me on the back. We knew you wouldn't let us down. Jason just nodded, like this was expected. Like I was a tool that was finally being put to proper use. I tried to bring up the risks. The surgery. The recovery time. Mia, this is your brother, my mom said sharply. You don't think twice about family. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. My dad scoffed, shaking his head. What kind of person hesitates when their own blood needs them? I started researching, and that's when I realized just how dangerous this could be for me. I had underlying health issues that made surgery riskier. My doctor explained that my recovery wouldn't be a few weeks. It could be months. My body would never be the same. I'd be at a higher risk for kidney disease myself. And if anything ever happened to my remaining kidney, I'd be screwed. And then there was the financial part. I had student loans. My job didn't offer paid medical leave. If I did this, I wouldn't just be losing a kidney. I'd be losing my income, my stability, my future. And through all of this, not once did my parents or Jason ask how I felt. Not once did they sit me down and say, Mia, this is your choice. We support you no matter what. Because to them, it wasn't a choice. It was an expectation. Still, I hoped, stupidly, that if I sat them down and explained everything, they'd understand. So I did. I told them I wasn't sure I could do this. The room went silent. My mom's face froze. My dad blinked at me, like I had just spoken a foreign language. Jason exhaled sharply and muttered, Of course. Typical. That hurt more than it should have. What do you mean you're not sure? My mom demanded. I tried to stay calm. Mom, this isn't a simple surgery for me. There are risks. My recovery could take months. I'd have to take time off work and My dad cut me off with a scoff. So what? People donate kidneys all the time. They're fine. Not everyone, I shot back. And not me. My mom stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is about your brother's life, Mia. How can you even think about money right now? Because it's my life too. I wanted to scream it, but I could already feel it, the shift. The moment they realized I wasn't just hesitating, I was actually considering saying no. And just like that, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the problem. Jason rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. I turned to him, my hands shaking. Jason, this isn't personal. You're making it personal, he snapped. You're choosing to let me die. My dad's voice was cold. This is your brother, Mia. He'd do it for you. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. Would he? I asked, staring right at Jason. If the situation were reversed, would you give me your kidney? His eyes darted to our parents for half a second before he muttered, That's not the point. Right. Of course it wasn't. My mom's hands were shaking now, but not from sadness, from anger. I can't believe you're doing this, she whispered. Then came the guilt trip. My dad started listing everything they had ever done for me. My school tuition, my clothes, my doctor's visits as a kid. My mom started crying, repeating over and over, How could you do this to us? Like I had just committed an unforgivable sin. And Jason, he delivered the final blow. You know what, Mia? His voice was cold. I always knew you'd be useless when it actually mattered. I felt something inside me crack. I had spent my whole life cheering for him, sacrificing for him, being nothing so he could be everything. And the second I put myself first, I was nothing to him. I turned to leave. My mom grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Her face twisted with something I had never seen before. You are his sister, she hissed. You were born to help him. I froze. Something inside me sank. What did you just say? The second the words left her mouth, her face changed, like she had just realized she said too much. But it was too late. I knew, and I was about to find out just how deep this went. I don't remember leaving the house. 1 second, I was standing there, my mother's fingernails digging into my skin, her words still hanging in the air. You were born to help him. And the next, I was outside, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My ears were ringing. My chest felt too tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. What the hell had she meant? I drove without thinking, my vision blurring at the edges. I needed answers. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me I was wrong. I ended up at Aunt Marian's house. She opened the door before I even knocked. One look at my face, and her expression shifted from confusion to something worse, recognition. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Mia. Her voice was cautious. I stepped inside. The warmth of her house felt wrong against my cold skin. She said I was born to help him, I blurted out. My voice was too loud, too shaky. She said it like it was a fact, like it was something I should have already known. Aunt Marian inhaled sharply. She didn't ask me what I meant. She didn't act surprised. Her silence was louder than if she had screamed. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. You knew. She closed her eyes for a second. Mia, sit down. Just tell me. My voice cracked. She hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. Your parents didn't have you because they wanted another child, she said quietly. They had you because Jason needed a bone marrow donor. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I had spent my entire life begging for their love, trying to be good enough, trying to matter to them, but I never stood a chance, because I was never supposed to matter. I was a backup plan. I barely heard Aunt Marian when she said, I wanted to tell you, but they threatened to cut me off completely if I did. I didn't want to lose you, Mia. I stared at the floor, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. It made sense. It made so much sense that it made me sick. The way my achievements were never celebrated. The way my parents only talked about me in relation to Jason. The way my whole life had revolved around being useful. They never told me, I whispered. Aunt Marian rubbed her arms like she was cold, even though the house was warm. They were never going to. I forced myself to look at her. Marian, I said slowly. I remember them trying for a baby before me. Her face went pale. She didn't answer. That silence? It was louder than a scream. Cold dread curled in my stomach. How many? She swallowed. Mia, don't. How many? She squeezed her eyes shut. Then, barely above a whisper, 3. The floor felt like it tilted beneath me. 3. 3 pregnancies. 3 failed attempts. 3 times they had tried to create the perfect match, and when those didn't work, they got rid of them. I was the successful one. My stomach twisted violently, and for a second, I thought I might throw up. I shot up from the chair, my breathing too fast. I have to go. Aunt Marion reached for me, but I stumbled back. Mia, please. My throat felt like it was closing. I need air. I barely remember getting into my car. I don't remember the drive back. All I know is that, suddenly, I was home, and I was angry. The kind of anger that makes your hands shake, that makes your vision blur, that makes your whole body feel like it's vibrating. I walked into the house, slamming the door behind me. My mom was in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine. My dad stood near the dining table, arms crossed. They were waiting for me. Jason wasn't there. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mom let out a long sigh, setting down her glass. I suppose Marion told you. I didn't even blink. That's all you have to say? She tilted her head. What do you want me to say, Mia? That we regret saving Jason? I felt my nails digging into my palms. That's not what you did. She let out a small, cold laugh. Then what did we do? You built him a fucking spare parts kit and called it a daughter. My dad finally stepped in, his voice calm, too calm. Watch your tone, Mia. I actually laughed. Or what? I shot back. You'll guilt me into giving up my kidney too? His jaw tightened. You should be grateful, my mom said. We gave you everything. A home, an education, a good life. I stared at her. And if I wasn't a match? She blinked. What? I took a step closer. If I wasn't a match for Jason, would you have still kept me? She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was long enough. My breath hitched. You didn't have to keep me, did you? She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be dramatic, Mia. Something inside me snapped. I turned to my dad. Say it. He didn't answer. Say it. I shouted. He exhaled through his nose, like he was bored of this conversation. We saved his life, he said finally. That was the priority. My vision blurred. Not me. Never me. I turned toward the door. My whole body felt like it was on fire. Mia, my dad said, his voice patient now, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You need to stop being dramatic and think about this rationally. Jason is sick. He needs you. I gripped the doorknob. And what happens when he needs something else? I asked, my voice shaking. Neither of them answered. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I walked out. I didn't just leave the house that night. I left them. And I knew, deep down, without a doubt, that I was never coming back. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of Aunt Marion's guest room, my body exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. The way she hadn't even hesitated before saying it. We saved his life. That was the priority. Not me. Never me. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was creeping through the curtains. I felt heavy, like I was sinking into the mattress. I forced myself up. My mouth was dry. My body ached, like I had been in a fight. In a way, I guess I had. Aunt Marion was already in the kitchen when I walked in. She glanced up from her coffee, her eyes scanning my face like she was afraid I might break. Morning, she said carefully. I just nodded, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. My hands were steady, but I still felt unreal, like I wasn't fully inside my own body. Mia, are you okay? I let out a hollow laugh. No, she sighed, rubbing her forehead. I figured. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the coffee machine humming in the background. Then, Aunt Marion set her mug down and looked at me. What are you going to do now? I blinked at her. The question knocked something loose in my brain. Because I hadn't thought that far ahead. I had spent the last 24 hours reacting. To my parents. To Jason. To the truth. But now? Now I had to decide what the hell came next. I stared down at my coffee. I don't know. She nodded, like she understood. Then she hesitated. Mia, you know you can stay here as long as you need to. But I need to say something, and I don't want you to get upset. I glanced up at her. What? She exhaled slowly. I don't think they're going to let you go that easily. A cold feeling crept down my spine. What do you mean? I mean, she hesitated, choosing her words. Your parents have spent your whole life making sure you see yourself as part of Jason, as his shadow, as his backup. They're not just going to accept that you walked away. I swallowed. I don't care, I said, but my voice wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. Aunt Marion gave me a knowing look. Then you need to be prepared for whatever they do next. I didn't have to wait long. That night, my phone started blowing up. At first, it was just my mom. Mom, Mia, we understand you're upset. Please just come home and talk to us. Mom, your father and I just want to fix this. Then Jason joined in. Jason, stop being dramatic. Jason, you've made your point, okay? Just come home and be a decent person for once. I ignored them. The next morning, the tone changed. Mom, you're being incredibly selfish, Mia. Dad, family sticks together. You're making a mistake. And then, the threats. Mom, if you don't come back, don't bother calling us ever again. Dad, if something happens to Jason, that's on you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. And then, the final message. From Jason. Jason, you're dead to me. I read the words over and over, something cold and hollow settling in my chest. I should have been angry, hurt, but all I felt was done. I blocked them. For the first time in my life, I cut them off completely, and for a few days, everything was quiet. Too quiet, like the moment before a storm. Then, one night, I was driving home from work when I saw the red and blue lights flash behind me. My stomach dropped. I wasn't speeding. My registration was fine. I wasn't on my phone. There was no reason I should be getting pulled over. But I pulled over anyway, my hands tight on the steering wheel. My heartbeat was too loud. The officer approached my window. Ma'am, we received an anonymous tip about illegal substances in your vehicle. I'm going to need you to step out of the car. The world tilted. I felt like I was underwater. What? I managed to say. Step out of the car, please. I did. My legs felt like lead as I stepped onto the pavement, the night air suddenly too cold. They searched my car. And then, under my driver's seat, they found a small plastic bag filled with drugs. I had never seen it before in my life. But the second I saw it, I knew. I fucking knew. Jason. A mix of rage and panic surged through me, so intense I thought I might actually pass out. I barely heard the officer saying something about taking me in for questioning. I barely registered sitting in the back of a police car, my hands shaking violently. All I could think about was how far they were willing to go to control me, how they would rather have me locked up than let me walk away. At the station, I told them over and over that the drugs weren't mine, that I had been set up. They didn't believe me, until they checked the security footage. I held my breath as they pulled up the video, and there he was, Jason, on the screen, clear as fucking day, crouching next to my car, glancing around, then slipping the bag under my seat like he had done it 1,000 times before. My whole body went cold. The officers exchanged glances. One of them nodded. She's free to go. I barely heard them. I barely felt my legs as I stood up. Jason had tried to ruin my life. And my parents, they would defend him. I already knew they would. But this time, I wasn't going to let them win. I looked at the officer, my voice steady for the first time in hours. I want to press charges. My parents arrived at the police station within an hour. Not to check on me. Not to ask if I was okay. They came for Jason. The second my mom saw me, she went right past me, straight to the front desk, her voice hysterical. "Where is my son?" she demanded, clutching a tissue like she was the one suffering. "This is a huge misunderstanding. He's sick. He didn't know what he was doing." My dad wasn't far behind her, but unlike my mom, who had clearly decided to go for the grieving mother act, he went straight for me. "You forced him into this," he said, his voice low, angry. I let out a hollow laugh. I forced him? I gestured around us. I forced him to plant drugs in my car? I forced him to try and get me arrested? My dad's eyes flashed with something ugly. "You pushed him to this, Mia. You left him with no other choice." And that, That was the moment I truly understood. It didn't matter what Jason did. It didn't matter how much he hurt me. They would always choose him. Jason could have gotten me locked up. He could have ruined my entire life. And my parents would still be standing here, defending him. I stared at them, feeling something inside me go ice cold. "You did this," I said quietly, my voice dangerously calm. "You made him this way." My mom turned, her fake tears gone, her expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Aunt Marion told me," I said. "She told me why you had me." For a second, just a second, my mom's face changed. The guilt was there, flickering across her expression before she buried it. My dad stiffened beside her, his jaw locking. "I don't know what she told you," my mom said, recovering quickly, "but she's always wanted to turn you against us." I laughed. "I couldn't help it." "That's what you're going with?" I asked, shaking my head. "That she lied?" Neither of them spoke. I stepped closer. "Say it," I challenged. Still nothing. I could see it. The way my mom's fingers twitched, the way my dad's face hardened, the way they both looked at me like I was a problem to solve, not their daughter. But they didn't deny it. They couldn't. So I asked the one question that had been burning in my throat since I found out the truth. "If I hadn't been a match for Jason, would you have still kept me?" Silence. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad inhaled through his nose, like I was annoying him. And Jason, my brother, my flesh and blood, the reason I even existed, was sitting in the back of a police station, still not giving a single shit about what he had done to me. I swallowed, my throat tight. That's what I thought. One of the officers cleared his throat, reminding us all where we were. "If you're done, we have charges to process." My mom spun back toward him so fast it was like she had forgotten I was even there. "You don't understand," she pleaded, her voice rising again. "My son, he was just desperate. He wasn't thinking clearly." The officer didn't even blink. "The security footage speaks for itself, ma'am." And that's when my dad changed tactics. He stepped forward, lowering his voice like he was about to negotiate a business deal. "We can work something out," he said smoothly. "There's no need for all this. We don't want to escalate things. Like Jason hadn't just tried to frame me for a crime. Like this was just another family dispute that could be handled behind closed doors." And that was all I needed to hear. I turned to the officer, my decision already made. "I'd like to press charges." My mom gasped, like I had physically hit her. "Mia, you wouldn't." "I would." My dad's eyes darkened. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice low. I met his gaze, unflinching. "No," I said. "The mistake was ever thinking you cared about me." And then I walked out. It's been over a year since I walked out of that police station. A year since I pressed charges against Jason. Since I looked my parents in the eye and finally saw them for what they really were. They never reached out after that night. Not to apologize. Not to beg. They didn't have to. Because they had one last move left to play. It started a few months later, when a friend sent me a link. My mom had started a GoFundMe. I wish I was joking. The entire page was a sob story. She wrote about how their ungrateful daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. How Jason was wrongfully accused. How he was still sick. How they were struggling financially after everything they had done for me. And people, distant relatives, old family friends, complete strangers, ate it up. The comments were disgusting. Family is everything. How could she turn her back on her sick brother? I hope she realizes what she's done before it's too late. It was like watching a different version of my life. One where I really was the villain they had painted me to be. I might have ignored it. Might have let them dig their own graves and moved on. But then, one night, Aunt Marion and I sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the comments, and she sighed. "We should talk to your old doctor." I frowned. "What doctor?" "The one they took you to when you were a kid. The family doctor. He might have records. Proof." I didn't need proof. I already knew what they had done. But if there were documents, something undeniable that exposed them, maybe I could end this. So we tracked him down. Dr. Evans had retired years ago, but when we explained why we wanted to talk, he agreed to meet. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a few confirming details. Maybe just reassurance that I wasn't crazy. But what he told me was worse than anything I had imagined. I wasn't their second child. I was their fourth attempt. 3 pregnancies before me. 3 terminations. The second genetic testing showed the fetus wasn't a perfect match for Jason. They got rid of it. They weren't trying for a second child. They were trying to build one. I felt like the ground had just disappeared beneath me. I had always held on to this small, pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, there had been love there, somewhere. That even if I was born for Jason, they had grown to love me anyway. But I had never even been a person to them. I was a product. A successful test result. Aunt Marion held my hand as I sat there, trying to breathe, while Dr. Evans handed me old records. Medical documents. Notes. Things my parents probably thought I would never see. I took them, and I made a decision. I sent everything to the authorities. And once the investigation started, it spiraled fast. The fertility doctor my parents had worked with? He lost his license immediately. Turns out, my parents weren't even the only ones who had done this. There were other families. Other donor babies created under the same circumstances. The scandal exploded. My parents? They lost everything. The GoFundMe donations dried up. The people who had supported them vanished. Their names were dragged through the mud. And instead of admitting what they had done, they just doubled down. My dad called it fake news. My mom said they were being persecuted for being good parents. And Jason? Jason sat in prison, still acting like none of this was his fault. For a while, I thought they would disappear into the mess they created and finally leave me alone. But my parents had one last stunt left in them. One night, my cousin Jenna called me. Her voice panicked. "Mia, I don't know if you've heard, but Jason tried to kill himself." I felt something heavy drop in my chest. "What?" "I just saw your mom's post," she said. "She's saying he couldn't take it anymore. That he's in critical condition. That if you have even a shred of love left for your family, you'd come see him." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe it wasn't true. But what if it was? What if, despite everything, he really had hit rock bottom? So I checked. I called the prison. I didn't ask for details. Didn't want to get sucked into another manipulation game. I just asked, "Is my brother alive?" The officer on the phone sounded almost bored when he answered. "Yeah, he's fine." I exhaled slowly. "Is he in critical condition?" A pause. Then, "Not even close." That was it. That was all I needed to hear. They had faked his suicide attempt just to guilt me into coming back. And I wasn't even surprised. They had never cared about the truth. Only about control. I didn't respond. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I sent the Facebook post to the authorities. And within a week, my parents had nothing left. Family members finally cut them off. Their remaining friends abandoned them. My mom deleted her social media. My dad stopped trying to fight. It was over. And me? I finally started living. I moved to a new city, got a new job, built a new life. And the best part? I fell in love. His name is Ryan. He knows everything. Every dark, twisted detail of what my family put me through. And instead of treating me like some broken tragic story, he treats me like a person, like I matter. And the biggest change? I'm pregnant. At first, I was terrified. After everything I had been through, I was scared I wouldn't know how to be a good parent, that I'd somehow repeat the same mistakes my parents made. But then Ryan told me something that changed everything. You know exactly what not to do. And he's right. This baby will never grow up wondering if they were wanted. They will never feel like they have to earn my love. They will never be treated like a spare part for someone else. They will be loved. Fully. Completely. Unconditionally. I may not have been born into a real family, but I am creating one. And for the first time in my life, I am truly happy.